excited for you to join us today. For those that don't know about Rob, I think my favorite thing when I was kind of looking back into who Rob is that we do share a similarity in that we both went to law school. We both are attorneys, and so obviously we're kindred spirits of some of the most hated type of people in the real estate industry. Nobody likes lawyers, but you know, you're well known for writing and articles on notoriousrob.com, which you know, we've talked about. But we're bringing you in this September for a presentation at our annual conference, and I'm very excited to hear you speak. I'm looking forward to this. But first of all, just give us a little intro about kind of who you are, get people excited about coming to see you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Nabil. Thank you, OAR, for having me. It's like I used to say, it's often an act of courage to, I think, have me come speak to your membership. And I'm with you, man. Like I'm the way I look at it, I'm a lawyer larvae. I did the summer thing and I never practiced, so I think I'm a step ahead of you in terms of.
You dodged the bullet.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a strategy consultant in this space. I do a lot of these speaking things, and like you said, Notorious R.O.B is kind of where I do a lot of my crazy theories, you know, and posts that are way too long. But I'm excited to come talk about. It's a common topic, right? And this is one of the things that I think I talk about with, especially with realtor associations a lot, which is the major trends that are happening within the industry and with outside the industry that will affect everybody, right? You know, one of the things that I think about is that we tend to have a lot of conversation in the industry around things that are sort of, I don't know what to call it, you know, tech or sort of, you know, Zillow, Redfin, iBuyer, like what's happening, you know, it's sort of sensational, but I don't know that they're necessarily the most important, right? Or if we're talking about those things, then there are some real, truly important things underneath that I think we all need to pay attention to. So I'm kind of excited to come talk about it because who knows what's going to happen between now and September, but I already know sort of some of the bigger trends that, you know, especially with COVID and what happened. I wrote a long paper around, I've been doing research around all these things that I think are really important, I think, to keep an eye out. So yeah, well, that's what I'm going to be doing.
Well, you've already piqued my interest into coming to the conference, so I'll be
there. we get paid to be there, but now I want to be there. Now I want to be there. So, you know, we call our podcast Talking Real, and I feel like that fits so well with you because the things that you write about, you are like that. You're not scared to talk about important issues, and to really kind of dive into some of this stuff. And so that's something that we always wanted to do when we started our podcast and everything. And so we're excited to have you come in and talk because that will certainly inspire Nabil and I to kind of push that. And one of the things that you recently wrote about that we wanted to kind of pick your brain about, just to kind of get people amped up for the kind of stuff they may get to hear at the conference, is, in fact, I think just a week or two ago, we mentioned on our podcast that BlackRock had recently acquired a business that deals in rental ownership of homes. And so they were acquiring many thousands of homes, significant amount of money. And lo and behold, the Atlantic releases an article, and you've written a response to this sort of as who's to blame, because I think maybe we jumped to conclusions when we mentioned it. You know, we didn't talk too much about it, but at least highlighting that, is this a concern? And you kind of take a different tact. And I'd really love to hear some of your thoughts on this idea of institutional ownership and maybe what really the underlying issues are.
Sure. I mean, again, this is probably, and you know what, honestly, we should probably do like an actual long form podcast, right? Like, I don't know how long your things are. I do an hour minimum, you know, and I don't want to mind. I'm happy to talk because it takes some time to unpack it, but I'll try and give you like the real high level perspective on this. I think what COVID and these things did, COVID and the pandemic shutdown, to me, it accelerated long existing trends. Nothing new happened. Nothing new came out because of 2020. Instead, what happened was all these trends that were sort of happening just went like that. But you could see those trends. So housing affordability has been an issue for, I don't know, you know, a decade, maybe longer. And if you look at the real long-term trends, fundamentally, the problem is that the price of housing has increased at a rate that the price of wage growth simply does not sustain. Fine. Low mortgage rates, you know, money printing, et cetera, this type of thing kept them at a minimum. But one of the things I think we found through COVID is the institutions are now jumping in. And there's this sort of wanting to point fingers. And the Atlantic article he was talking about, you shouldn't blame BlackRock, right? First of all, institutions own like half of 1%, you know, of whatever. So it's really not that big a deal. who you should blame are local governments and NIMBYism and your neighbors want to keep out. And I'm like, look, that's all true. That's all correct. But my take on it was, I don't think it's fair, and I do this too, to some extent, but, it's not fair for some sort of media reporters, living in DC, who probably isn't home, like, why would you blame people for wanting to protect their asset? Because that's really what NIMBYism is. It's families who've saved up, they lived in an area for 10 years and they don't want to see a change, right? Now, we could say that's bad. We could condemn it. We could say this is why we don't have affordable housing. But I do think we need to understand sort of the truly human emotion, right? Like, look, these are homes. This is a neighborhood. This is not just an asset, like, sure, put up a 300 unit multifamily down the street. It's like, no, I live here. So it's, to me, there needs to be a little bit more understanding. So then what do you really blame? What I truly blame at the end of the day is government, right? Because on all fronts, and I'm opposed to zoning, I'm opposed to local levy school funding, I'm opposed to a lot of things. But articles like that, sort of misperception, misunderstanding, I think what it does is it sort of pits us against each other, right? As opposed to like truly trying to understand what really is the issue. What are the underlying causes? Again, we could go into real depth around that, but that's a topic. Now, am I going to talk about it in September? Probably, because one of the things that I think from a realtor standpoint, you got to think about is home ownership rate right now, I think, is somewhere in the 65% range. I think, right? I haven't checked it recently, but last time I looked, it was 65, 68. I mean, it's pretty high. But actually, if you break that down by generations, millennials and Gen Z are not at 50%. And what I'm saying is, if you look at what's happening in the economy, if you look at what's happening in the housing market, I don't know that millennials and Gen Z will ever get to 50%. So when people think about Renter Nation, when people are afraid of BlackRock, when people are terrified of Invitation Homes and all these like Wall Street landlords, I think what's underlying it is this sense, and I think realtors have it because y'all are like, they're out in the streets, that the young people are not buying houses. And they can't, like, if you think about it, if inflation is happening at somewhere in the 5 to 15% range, depending on which number you look at, wage growth is not happening at 5 to 15% a year. So 3 years from now, like, what 30-year-old is going to be able to afford to buy a home? Which means who's buying those homes? It's going to be institutions, it's going to be wealthy individuals, it's going to be family funds. If we get to below 50% home ownership, one of the points that I do like to make is it completely changes the politics of real estate. So you guys are, OAR, right? You're the state association. You do a lot of lobbying, with the state government. And a big part of your ability to have that conversation is because you could say 65% of your voters are homeowners, right? Don't do things that's going to piss them off. Listen, if 65% of your voters end up renters, that's going to completely change the calculus if I'm a state rep, if I'm a congressman, if I'm a senator. Do you know what I mean? And this is something that I think we don't pay attention to. So I'm like, this is something we need to pay attention to. So when I talk about housing affordability is one of these issues. If you're not doing housing affordability as a realtor organization, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't know what more important topic there is for lobbying efforts, right? Except maybe the other big trend that we're going to talk about, which is the fact that the federal government is absolutely coming after realtors. No question about it. They are coming after y'all. They do want to change the MLS. And whether you like that or dislike that, afraid of it, not afraid of it, I think it's worth at least understanding what the issues are, how sort of the, I like to call the intellectual elite perceive what's happening in real estate. This is something that I think kind of gets left out, right? Because it's become, I don't want to say partisan necessarily, but it's become emotional, right? Like, in fact, I just saw an op-ed today that Charlie Oppler, the president of NAR, put out, I think on some Riz Media, like defending the current system. I'm like, look, obviously, like, Charlie, that's what your job, you're supposed to do that. The problem is, as a result, it's become this like, we need to defend this, whatever, home ownership, et cetera. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but you're not understanding what the other side thinks of this. So if you're going to get into a fight, and I think there's going to be a fight, at least you need to understand what the other side is saying. and there's not a whole lot of coverage around that that's not tainted. So I feel like that's something we're going to talk about. And then we'll talk, probably the other major trend, is things like, here's one that I often talk about. In fact, I almost always talk about. In the last 10 years, in fact, last 20 years, what do people think is the most important innovation, disruption that has happened to real estate? Give me like, it's not just your opinion. Like, what do your members say? Like, what do they think is the biggest disruption that's happened in the last 20 years?
I mean, a lot of them are going to be pointing to, you hear so much about iBuyers being a big factor these days.
Right. Zillow, Redfin, right? iBuyers.
Which again, I suspect is a relatively small portion of the actual market share at this point.
Right. To me, the biggest disruption in the last 20 years is the fact that the agent team is completely taking over the industry. And we don't think about it. We don't talk about it. We don't want to deal with it, except that if you look at how companies and people are behaving, it's obvious. It is plain as day. So we're going to talk about that.
That's really interesting.
I love it, man. We've got, like you said, we've got a short window today to have you on, but this is a teaser that if people watch this and aren't coming to conference, I don't know what you're doing. You must not. I don't want to say you don't care, but man, if people aren't engaging in these conversations, having these conversations, talking about these things, trying to understand what is going on. These are big issues. We're talking about institutional ownership of rental properties. We're talking about these major players in the industry. We're talking about how we are running our own industry ourselves, and are we doing the right things with what we're doing? We have this strong position, but is it the right one? Do we understand the other positions? Man, these are, oh man, I'm like fired up. I'm ready.
So I like to say, and this is typical. I go do a presentation of, like realtor associations, 600 people in the room. And like half of the room is sitting there like, oh my God. And the other half is terrified. And like, who is this guy? Get him out of here. So I like to make half the room think and terrify the other half. So
well, no matter how people end up at the end of what you say, they need to be there to hear it, because regardless of how they feel about it, these are important issues that we need to talk about. So man, I really hope people do get fired up to come listen. I look forward to, you said we could do a whole long form podcast. So I look forward to that opportunity. We're going to hold you to that one.
Maybe we'll do it live, when I'm there. I think that'll be
I like
fun.
that.
Oh, you are speaking our language. You are
hey man, like maybe we could do it as a Q&A, like have an audience and, have audience participation. Because to me, it's like the way I look at it, people should attend this event, especially this year, because so many things are changing. And these are conversations you need to be having, not just when you're at conference. Like, you need to be having these conversations with your sphere, with your office, with your peers, with your agents, with your broker. Like, these are big things that's going to impact things. And it's very hard to have these conversations when you're kind of in the trenches day to day, and there's a billion things you have to do. And I get it. I completely get it. And I'm like, that's why I'm here looking at the big picture, so you don't have to. But it's not about my opinion of it. It's about what your opinions are, right? It's about how you perceive and how you think of these things. And I think that to me would be the most valuable thing to come out of this is, imagine a couple hundred people, whether you agree with me or disagree with me or say I'm whatever, at least having conversations with one another and try and figure out, how does this affect us here in Oklahoma, right? Are we seeing this trend here? I think that would be the value. So I look forward to the conversation, man.
Yeah, and only through those conversations and thinking about it can you form your opinion. So
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, Nabila, how can people get signed up so they can make sure they're at the conference to hear Rob and everybody else that we're bringing in? Where do they go for that?
It'll be a great event.
It will be. They should already know this. Who hasn't signed up for this? But it's oarconference.com. So go on there, check it out. Check out the fantastic lineup we have and sign up for the conference.
Absolutely. Cool. So Rob, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes today. I can't wait to meet you in person in September and having that opportunity where we can sit down and have a full podcast with you. But man, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I am very excited, and we will see you here in just a couple months along with everybody else in September.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rob.